We know that economics and very many behavioral sciences deal with the relationship between variables and constants. Constants are items which have the same unchanged values throughout the entire analysis. Variables change their values, they vary, which is why they are called variables. Now, if there exists a relationship between two or more variables, we use correlation as the statistical tool to study that relationship. We calculate correlation coefficients, and this can be simple regression, simple correlation, multiple correlation, and so on. Here in this module, we shall take up simple regression, which is related to correlation yet distinct from it. Simple regression is basically a tool, a very important tool of economics primarily, to study the relationship that may exist between two or more variables and use that to predict or estimate the value of one variable from another, of an unknown variable from the value of a variable which is known. If two variables are significantly correlated, and if there is some theoretical basis for regarding them as such, it is possible to predict the values of one variable from those of the other. This is what is the link between correlation analysis and what is known as regression analysis. Regression analysis thus means estimation or prediction of unknown values of one variable from known values of the other variables, used primarily in economics but also in natural, social and physical sciences. Prediction or estimation is a major problem in almost all the spheres of human activity, especially so in business and economics, to find out if they are causally related or whether there is only a spurious relationship between them, relating demand and supply, cost and production, consumption, output, so many things, investment, sales, profit, income, population estimates, population projections, gross national product, gross domestic product, tax, budget, so many things we can study using the regression analysis and related correlation analysis. Most commonly, regression analysis estimates the conditional expectation of the dependent variable given the independent variable, that is, the average value of the dependent variable when the independent variables are fixed.
After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the concept and usefulness of regression analysis, to differentiate between linear and non-linear relations, dependent and independent variables, stochastic and deterministic relationships, to understand the concepts of popular regression function and sample regression function, to understand the difference between simple and multiple linear regression models. Regression analysis, in general sense, means the estimation or prediction of the unknown value of one variable from the known value of the other variable. It is one of the most important statistical tools which is extensively used in natural, social, and physical sciences. Prediction or estimation is one of the major problems in almost all the spheres of human activity. It is specially used in business and economics to study the relationship between two or more variables that are related causally, and for the estimation of production and consumption functions and the prediction of prices, investments, sales, profits, income, etc. Similarly, population estimates and population projections, GNP, revenue and expenditure, etc., are indispensable for economists and efficient planning of an economy.
So, in order to get into the spirit of the whole thing, let us look at certain very elementary but profound concepts, linear relations and non-linear relations. In general, two variables x and y are usually the symbol for variables, whereas a, b, c, d, these are, or alpha, beta, gamma, these are the symbols for constants. In general, two variables x and y are said to be linearly related if there exists between them a relationship of the form y equals a plus bx, where y is the line's position on the vertical axis of our diagram at any point, x is the line's position on the horizontal axis at any point, b, small b, that is usually, is the slope of the line, and a, that is small a, intercept on the y axis where x equals 0. The relationship between the two variables is said to be nonlinear if corresponding to a unit change in one variable, the other variable does not change at a constant rate but changes at a fluctuating rate. This is nonlinear relationship. In such cases, if the data are plotted on a graph paper, we will not get a straight line. We may have a relationship representing it which may be of the form y equals a plus bx plus cx to the power 2. In regression analysis, we are interested in the linearity of parameters and not of variables. Hence, a function of the form y square equals a plus b root x is linear in parameters a and b, and it is not linear in the variables x and y, because y is y square and x is root x. This translates into a and b becoming a linear function of its dependent variables.
Let us discuss different types of relationships between two variables. In general, two variables x and y are said to be linearly related if there exists a relationship of the form y is equal to a plus bx, where y is the line's position on the vertical axis at any point, x the line's position on the horizontal axis at any point, b is the slope of the line, a the intercept with the y-axis where x equals 0. The relationship between two variables is said to be nonlinear if, corresponding to a unit change in one variable, the other variable does not change at a constant rate but changes at a fluctuating rate. In such cases, if the data is plotted on a graph sheet, we will not get a straight line. For example, one may have a relation of the form y is equal to a plus bx plus cx square. It is important to note that in regression analysis, we are interested in linearity of parameters and not of variables. Hence, a function of the form y square is equal to a plus b under root x is linear in parameters a and b, and it is not linear in the variables x and y. However, we can translate them in such a way that a and b becomes a linear function of its dependent variables.
Supposing we are relating the salaries of employees to their level of education, that would again be a simple regression type analysis. However, if in addition we take into account their years of experience or their exposure to foreign education, that would again bring in multiple factors, and it would no longer be simple regression but multiple regression. In other words, in two variable regression, there is only one explanatory variable, whereas in multiple regression there are more than one explanatory variable. 2 or 3 variables are being studied in order to explain the change in the dependent variable. This is the basic distinction. Another distinction would be between stochastic and deterministic relationships.
Let us understand the difference between simple regression model and multiple regression model. In simple regression, only two variables are involved, whereas more than two variables are involved in multiple regression model. In simple regression model, we study the relationship between one dependent and one independent variable. For example, the relationship between crop yield and rainfall. In multiple regression model, one variable is dependent and others are independent. For example, the relationship between crop yield and rainfall, temperature, sunshine, etc.
In the simple regression model, which we are studying in this module, we have this relationship yi standing for any individual observation, yi equals a plus bxi, again small I standing for the individual x observation, plus ui, that is again u of the individual observation. Now what is this u? I mean, where does it come from? There are three types of variables in this model, as you see: y, x and u. What is being explained? The one factor y, and it is being explained by this one factor x. So it is a simple regression model. Although there is the letter u, it doesn't mean that it is multiple regression or anything. So what then is u? All the other factors that affect y other than x are jointly denoted by ui. Y is the endogenous variable, dependent variable, explained variable, controlled variable which is being regressed, and x is the exogenous variable, independent variable, explanatory variable, regressor or control variable. Y is the endogenous variable, dependent variable, explained variable, controlled variable or regressand, whereas x is the exogenous variable, independent variable, explanatory variable, control variable or regressor. Variable ui represents factors other than x that affect y. It is called the error term or the random disturbance term. The disturbance term can also capture measurement error in the dependent variable. The disturbance is an unobservable variable. Technically, ui is known as the stochastic disturbance or stochastic error term. It is an unknown thing. That is why u is the usual letter that is employed to indicate this. It is the stochastic disturbance or stochastic error. It is an error. It is a disturbance. The parameters a and b are fixed and generally unknown. On the right side of the equation, as we see, there are two parts: the systematic or deterministic component a plus bxi and the random disturbance or non-systematic component ui.
A deterministic or functional relationship is an exact relationship between the predictor x and the response y. Take, for instance, the conversion relationship between temperature in degrees Celsius C and temperature in degrees Fahrenheit F. We know the relationship is F is equal to 95 C plus 32. This is a deterministic relationship, but if the readings of the temperature are taken by another person, then there will be some element of error and the readings will be different from the earlier ones. In this case, it becomes stochastic. A random or stochastic variable is a variable that can take on any set of values, positive or negative, with a given probability. In deterministic variables, we deal with dependence among variables, but these variables are not random or stochastic.
Now, before we proceed further, let us discuss of the distinction between population and a sample, which is very, very important so far as any regression, correlation or other statistical analysis is concerned. We must remember that all this, all empirical or statistical studies are in order to assess what is true or what is observably, verifiably correct for a large population, entire number. But since it is very difficult to measure, to get exact accounts, head counts of all the variables involved, all the observations involved, what we generally do is we take subsets of all the observations. These subsets of observations are what is known as a sample. A population means all the observations of a particular variable are there. A sample means some representative elements of the population are there. You may have different samples out of the same population. A sample therefore represents one possible way of looking at the entire population. What we always want is to get some idea of the population. We are taking the samples. Samples are taken to approximate what is the population and its characteristics. So this element is always there, and it leads to what elsewhere are called sampling errors or biases. There are very many ways of looking at this. Different variables, different sets of measured are being studied. They are still in the process of evolving about how to how to make up this gap, how to gauge the difference between sample and population. Here also, this distinction between a population and a sample is very, very important.
In the simple regression model, the population regression model is given by yi is equal to a plus bxi plus ui. It is important to point out that it is also a conditional expectation function and can be formulated as, here y is referred to as the endogenous, dependent or explained variable, and x is the exogenous, independent or explanatory variable. The variable ui represents factors other than x that affect y. It is denominated error or random disturbance. The disturbance term can also capture measurement error in the dependent variable. Technically, a plus bx is deterministic component and ui is known as the stochastic disturbance or stochastic error. The basic idea of the regression model is to estimate the population parameters a and b from a given sample. The sample regression function, SRF, is the sample counterpart of the population regression function, PRF. Since the SRF is obtained for a given sample, a new sample will generate different estimates. The SRF, which is an estimation of the PRF, is given by y cap I is equal to a cap plus b cap xi, where y cap is read as y hat or y cap. Y cap I is the estimator of expectation of y given xi, a cap is the estimator of a, b cap is the estimator of b. This equation allows us to calculate the fitted value y cap I for y when x is equal to xi. In the SRF, a cap and b cap are the estimators of a and b. After understanding population regression function and sample regression function, let us understand the concept of residual term. For each xi, we have an observed value yi and a fitted value y cap I. The difference between yi and y cap I is called the residual u cap. In other words, observed value of yi is the summation of residual term and fitted value. Let us understand the concepts we have learned so far with the help of a diagram. In the figure, we have taken x values on x-axis and y values on y-axis. Expectation of y given xi is a linear function of xi with intercept a and slope b. Its counterpart SRF is also a linear function. Our estimate of the PRF based on the SRF is at best an approximate one. This approximation is shown diagrammatically in the figure. For x is equal to xi, we have one sample observation, y is equal to yi. In terms of the SRF, the observed yi can be expressed as yi is equal to y cap I plus u cap I. And in terms of the PRF, it can be expressed as yi is equal to expectation of y given xi plus ui. Now, in the figure, y cap I overestimates the true expectation of y given xi for the xi shown therein. Similarly, for any xi to the left of the point A, the SRF will underestimate the true PRF. This over and underestimation is because of sampling fluctuations. SRF is an approximation of the PRF, and therefore we need to devise a method to make this approximation as close as possible. Regression analysis explains the impact of changes in an independent variable on the dependent variable. The objective of such analysis is to estimate and/or predict the mean or average value of the dependent variable on the basis of the known or fixed values of the explanatory variables. In this analysis, it is important to identify two types of variables. Dependent variable is the variable we wish to explain. Independent variable is the variable used to explain the dependent variable. Study of only two variables at a time is simple regression analysis, whereas the relationship between a dependent variable and two or more independent variables is known as multiple regression analysis. A deterministic model is one in which the dependent variable is uniquely determined by parameters in the model. Conversely, in a stochastic model, randomness is present. The key concept underlying regression analysis is the concept of the conditional expectation function CEF or population regression function PRF. Our primary objective in regression analysis is to estimate the PRF. Yi is equal to A plus Bxi plus Ui. On the basis of the SRF, Yi is equal to A cap plus B cap xi plus U cap I.
To sum up, A hat, B hat, Y hat and Ui hat are the sample counterparts of A, B, expected value of Y conditional upon Xi and Ui respectively. A hat is the counterpart of A, B hat is the counterpart of B, Y hat is the counterpart of E, Yi conditional Xi and U hat I is the counterpart of Ui. It is possible to calculate A hat and B hat for a given sample, but the estimates will change for each sample. On the contrary, A and B are fixed but unknown. The primary objective in regression analysis is to estimate the population regression function on the basis of the sample regression function. This is the purpose of the entire analysis. But there are sampling fluctuations in the estimate of the PRF based on the SRF, which is why the estimate is really only an approximate one. You look at figure 1. For x equal to xi, we have one sample observation y equals yi. In terms of the SRF, the observed yi can be expressed as yi equals y hat I plus ui hat, and in terms of the population regression function, it can be expressed as yi equals e yi conditional xi and ui. If you look at the diagram, you will see that y hat I overestimates the true e y conditional xi for the xi which is shown therein. Similarly, for any xi which lies to the left of the point A, the sample regression function underestimates the true value of PRF, the population regression function. on the left of the point A, you have the sample regression function underestimating the population regression function. On the right side of point A, where the two lines are intersecting, you find that there is overestimation of the population regression function by the sample regression function. So, this is a fluctuation, it is there because of sampling fluctuations, which emphasizes the point that SRF is an approximation of the PRF, and therefore we need to devise a method to make this approximation as close as possible. Let us summarize by saying that regression analysis explains the impact of changes in an independent variable upon the dependent variable or variables. Dependent variable, the variable we wish to explain, depends on the independent variable or variables. When we study only two variables at a time, it is simple regression analysis. In a deterministic model, the dependent variable is uniquely determined by parameters in the model. In a stochastic model, randomness, error, etc. are there. The key concept underlying regression analysis is the concept of the conditional expectation function CEF or the population regression function PRF. The primary objective in regression analysis is to estimate the PRF on the basis of the SRFs that are available.